Thank you. Welcome. Good morning. It's good to see you all here. Excited to be in front of you. My name is Matt Ryerson. I'm President and CEO of the United Way here in Bradley County. I have worked in the nonprofit sector for over 20 years. It's been a great privilege and opportunity, and I have a lot of lessons learned, done a lot of things right, done a lot of things wrong, and hopefully I can share some of those things with you today. I also spent some time in the for-profit sector. I was an administrator at a psychiatric hospital, which is great. I met my wife there. She worked there. You guys, I have 4 children, 9, 7, 3, and 1. I have not committed all their names to memory. I mean, it's 4 kids. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm going to share a little bit about what I've learned and some concepts that I brought with me in a text that I think you might appreciate. And it really is based off the concept of stewardship. And when we're talking about stewardship, I really want to go to Scripture. In Psalm 24:1 says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it." The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. Everything, where you sit, the trees you walk by, that squirrel that annoys you, the birds, everything is the Lord's. Everything. If we go to Genesis 2, verse 15, "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it." I think that's a statement really for all of us, that we have a responsibility to take care of all that is God's. And we just heard that everything is God's, which means the trees. We have a responsibility to take care of the trees. The chair you're sitting in, we have a responsibility to take care of that. The money of this world, the money as a servant that you may receive, that you may donate, we have a responsibility to take care of it. And why I think that's important is that God wisely didn't give us unlimited resources. Because anybody that has unlimited resources tends to spoil or waste those resources. The fact that they're limited usually creates a sense of stewardship, responsibility that we should have. So that's what we're talking about today. The idea of stewardship and how do we apply that in the work of service. I assume you are working through or have worked through the why. Why do you serve? Why did you come to Lee University? Why do you come to a service-centered university? That's a question I hope you've already answered or you're working through. I'm not going to talk about any of that today. I'm going to talk about the how. How do we serve? Because it is our responsibility. It is our work. So how do we do it? How do we do it effectively and with good stewardship? Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a gentleman that's really been a mentor to me, an author that has an incredible text. But I'm going to start off with 2 concepts. At the United Way, at my church, at ministries I've worked in, and nonprofits I've worked in, there are generally 2 categories for needs that we serve in this world. And so for you, for me, there are generally 2 categories. And it's really simple. And now, I do want to kind of throw out this caveat. I am going to oversimplify everything. We've got less than 50 minutes to plow through this. If you have questions, I'd love to follow up. I'm going to refer you to a fantastic text that goes into great detail on these concepts. But I'm going to be quick and hit the high points. So when we talk about those 2 basic needs that we see, number 1 is crisis. So if you write on the left side of your page, you're not going to take a ton of notes today, but if you write crisis on the left side of your page, that's one need that we meet. What does that look like? Give me an example. What's a crisis need look like in our world today? Katrina is a great example, right? A devastating hurricane of epic proportions that we had not seen before that left people stranded and desperate for water, clean water to drink. That is a crisis that needs immediate attention. Another example. What's that? Earthquake in Haiti. Wow. Devastating. The death toll and the devastation for the facilities and the infrastructure, unbelievable. Absolute crisis. For those of you that have been here a while, maybe you grew up here and 2011, actually April 27th, 2011, this county, this community, was hit by the most devastating natural disaster we had ever experienced. We had a series of tornadoes that went storming through here on one day from 8 in the morning until about 9 o'clock at night. 5 different tornadoes, the most powerful tornadoes that they can measure. Over 1,500 homes were seriously damaged. 285 were wiped off the face of the earth. Not a twig left of them. 9 people were killed. Entrapments exceeded 40. That was crisis. In fact, my house happened to be in the path of one of those tornadoes, a tornado that went through at 8:42 p.m. I'll never forget that. So I looked out my window and saw a funnel cloud moving toward my house at about 60 miles an hour. Stood there and looked at that, and my immediate courageous reaction was to turn to my wife and say, "Are you seeing this?" So it's crazy. We were very fortunate. Our home was not directly impacted. We lost 8 homes on our block. In fact, Dr. William Lamb, who's a professor here, was my next door neighbor, lost half his house. I joke and tease. He was in here earlier. I say to him all the time, it's really frustrating because I had to call him on a daily basis and say, "William, get your house out of my yard. It's just sitting out here. You need to move this, right? I can't mow." But it was a devastating crisis of epic proportions, and we didn't have power. In fact, emergency crews had a hard time getting to us because there were literally houses in the road. There were telephone poles down. And as things began to be restored, you realize you were hungry, you had no food, you were really struggling through the day. Everybody's in the streets doing work on other people's properties, trying to help. And these churches, an American Red Cross, all these organizations were showing up to the neighborhood, and they'd have these hot meals and cold bottles of water. And I can't even tell you the impact that had on our spirits that day. To be able to open that water and to get a hot meal in the midst of all this devastation and sit down and fellowship with your neighbors, many of which, sadly, we didn't even know each other's names until that day. It was pretty powerful, the tears and the fellowship. That crisis response was absolutely vital. So that's the first, crisis is the first need that we often see. The other side of your page, if you want to go to the other side here, write chronic poverty. Chronic poverty. So those are generally the 2 types of needs. Now again, don't come up here afterwards and say, "I know of like 10 other needs that don't fit in those categories." I know. I agree with you. There's generally 2 types of needs we deal with, crisis and chronic poverty. That's where we're going to stay today, all right? The crisis response requires, if you're going to draw a line down from that word crisis, the crisis response requires relief. So when you talk about Katrina, I mean, there are people on rooftops with no water that literally can't survive more than a couple days. That requires immediate relief. We need just to go get those people. We need to drop off supplies. When there were people trapped in my neighborhood, their house caved in on them, they couldn't get out, they just needed immediate relief. They needed somebody to help come get them out. So when there's crisis, it requires relief. We talk about those 2. Those are domestic situations. If you start looking at some of the work internationally, and if you have the opportunity, I really challenge you to do some of the travel that Lee offers you. And you'll be able to you'll get the opportunity to experience some of these firsthand in some of these countries where crisis relief response is absolutely necessary. Whether it's refugee camps or some of the natural disasters that they experience or the extraordinary level of poverty that they have. Crisis and relief. On the other side of the page, chronic poverty requires a whole different approach. And really, if you're going to draw a line down from chronic poverty, I want you to put the word development. So basically, we've outlined 2 types of needs, and then we've also outlined 2 types of responses. Crisis relief, chronic poverty, development. Now, I'll tell you, relief in the world of social services is easy. It's fast, it's quick, it's energized, And when I say easy, I don't mean, oh, it's a piece of cake. What I mean is it's easier of the two. Development takes time and is hard. And we're going to discuss that in detail over the next 50 minutes. So now I'm going to take a quick pause. I'm going to tell you about this author. This friend of mine, Bob Lupton. Have anybody read this book? It's called Toxic Charity. Has anybody read this? Yes, I'll let them know that you all read it and that you bought it and that it wasn't. You'd be thrilled by that. I'll tell you, it's recommended reading. It's going to be really a very deep, intense look at what I'm describing today, and it is well worth your money. If you get the opportunity, invest of it. How many of you read the text, When Helping Hurts? Anybody? I see a few hands here. Also a recommended text, When Helping Hurts. But toxic charity is kind of the basis of this concept that I'm telling you about. The two types of needs, the responses, and as we dig down the cycles that are contributing factors to these situations. So Bob Lupton is a really interesting character. He works for an organization, he founded an organization called FCS Urban Ministries. It's based in historic South Atlanta, and he's done some amazing work. Now he's done amazing work because he did amazingly bad work for a long time, and he learned from that and grew from that and created one of the most impactful organizations that we've ever seen. And he is an absolutely inspiring figure. He came down here about a year ago. I got to spend time with him, really kind of grilled him on some of his concepts. He is very confrontational because he absolutely believes in what he says and what he has written in this book, and I agree with him. So some of these concepts over the next hour are going to be somewhat challenging to you, and I hope they are. I hope there's something that you take away and consider. But Bob worked for this organization called FCS Ministries, worked in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Atlanta, and he and his wife lived in the suburbs. And at one point, he felt convicted. He felt convicted that I need to move to the neighborhood I'm serving. Now, his wife had worked hard to develop, to design, and to build their dream home, which they had just moved into less than a year ago. So when he came home that day and said, honey, I think we need to move to one of the poorest neighborhoods with the worst schools in Atlanta soon, you can only guess her great joy in that experience. But she felt that he was convicted, that he was being pushed by the Lord, and so she followed, and their testimony is powerful. Now I'm going to share you this story. It's in his text. I've gotten the opportunity to hear him tell it personally, and I'll just say, when he tells this story today, decades later, he tells it with tears in his eyes. And it's the core principle of everything he does. So when he moved to the neighborhood, he built relationships. He spent some time with his neighbors. And Christmas rolled around, and he was at these two particular neighbors' houses. Not two particular, this is a husband and wife. They had 2 kids. He was at their house and spent some time with them. Over there drinking coffee. It was Christmas Eve. And he was particularly excited because he knew what was coming. And as he looked at this couple is a good couple, had fallen on tough times, had trouble finding work. The husband, as you can imagine, is generally like so many people in poverty. They had some health issues with one of their child. The debt with those medical issues just were overwhelming. He couldn't stay in college, so he's looking for work, could only find part-time work, didn't have health insurance. A whole massive series of events put them in a real hole, and they're in this tough neighborhood, not where they ever dreamed they would be, and certainly not where they had envisioned raising their children. But here they are, and they're having coffee with Bob Lupton on a Christmas Eve, and there's a knock at the door. Well, Bob can hardly contain his excitement, because he knows what's happening. When they open the door, there are 6 people in the doorway with presents, wrapped presents for the kids. And Bob could hardly contain his energy because he knew this was his organization and that they had been put on a list as people that needed gifts for their children. And it was at that moment that this book started, and everything that he really believes in the idea of his work started coming to fruition and started being planted in his mind. And as he's excited and these 6 people come storming the house, singing Christmas carols, high-fiving each other, kids are going crazy, right? They're bouncing off the wall. Woohoo! Christmas is here. They can't believe it. They couldn't be more excited. And he glances over at the father, or at least where the father was sitting, and he's gone. And he turns around, the father is slipping out the back of the room into the kitchen, sets down his coffee cup, and walks out the back door. walks out. And it was at that moment that he realized that what he had just told this father was, I know you love your children, but you cannot provide for them. You can't do it. You're coming up short, my friend. And so I'm going to do it for you. Now, you don't have to be a father to understand the impact that would have on any human being and any slice of dignity they have. This well-kept home that was in one of the poorest neighborhoods and wasn't a nice home had pride and dignity in it. And these people came from the suburbs with Christmas presents to highlight the fact that he couldn't do it, that he couldn't make enough money to buy his children Christmas gifts. He couldn't take it, he had to leave. The mother, Bob noticed, had a similar reaction, but she swallowed her pride because she knew the presents were for the kids, and she understood that these people were meaning well. She let them in her home, thanked them graciously, and they stepped back out. But the tone of that night had changed significantly. Sure, the kids had Christmas, and that was exciting. But he just saw what he had done. The people that delivered the gifts, how did they feel when they left? How many of you, and it's okay to raise your hand, have been a part of an organization or a ministry where you went to Kmart or Target or wherever and you bought Christmas gifts for a kid and a family that couldn't afford them for themselves? How many of you have been part of a program like that? So have I. In fact, I've delivered Christmas gifts exactly like that story I just described. I showed up at somebody's house, high-fiving kids, woohoo, Merry Christmas, without once thinking about the effect I'm having on the dignity of the recipient of my gifts. But I tell you, I can share how I felt. My chest was bursting with pride. I felt terrific. I went home. Wasn't that awesome? Whose dignity got built up in that situation? Mine did. The giver. Very rarely in these situations does the recipient's dignity get built. Typically, it gets chipped away at. And it was that day that Bob Lupton said, I will never do this program again. No more. I will not be involved with hurting the people that I serve. I will not be involved with a toxic charity. So, all right, we're going to skip back to the concepts, right? And then we'll come back and finish that story off here in a little bit. The concept, so you have crisis, right? And you have relief. And then you have chronic poverty and you have development. Where there becomes a real problem is when you switch the way you approach these problems or needs. And what I mean by that is if I have crisis and I have relief, and I take that relief mentality and I slide it across the page and I put it underneath chronic poverty. As soon as I start approaching chronic poverty with a relief mentality, we create a cycle that contributes to what I believe can become generational poverty. So we're going to walk through this. One of the most popular programs outside the Christmas programs around the holidays, and many of you have probably done something like this, is the turkey giveaway on Thanksgiving, right? Everybody gives away turkeys. Football teams give away turkeys. United Ways give away turkeys. We give away turkeys on Thanksgiving. Everybody should have a turkey on Thanksgiving. And if we get really good, we give them a box. We may give them a can of green beans, some of those crunchy onions. What are those called? I love those crunchy onions. They're good. But we throw them in there, right? And we give them a box and there's a whole meal. Every year, almost every community does a turkey giveaway. And here's how this cycle generally works. Hey, I hear that you're having tough times. We're doing a turkey giveaway, and I'd love to have some people deliver a whole box of turkey and some food for Thanksgiving so that you guys can celebrate Thanksgiving appropriately. Generally, the response we receive is, wow, thank you. That's wonderful. Yeah, we weren't going to be able to do it this year, so that's a wonderful blessing. Now, everybody in this world, everybody in this room has received some form of charity, right? Whether it's a friend buying you lunch unexpectedly or something. Something's happened to you where you've received charity. Now, for most of you, when you sit down at lunch and you envision you're going to split the lunch and they say, hey, I've got it today, what's been your general response? Right. No. We've got this. We're splitting this, right? There's a point of dignity in that. No, I've got it. Now, some people, you've experienced this, they're insistent, they're going to buy you lunch, they're going to buy you coffee, whatever the situation, you receive some sort of charity, and you usually will show that appreciation, right? But it's that appreciation with a hint of, I'm a little embarrassed that you think I need this, but thank you, right? Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing this turkey over. Appreciate that. That's the first step in the cycle, and that's good. You give something away, and the recipient appreciates it. That's great. In fact, that usually happens a couple times, 3, maybe 4. But any program that is a consistent giveaway program, there's a shift. There's a shift away from appreciation. And the next step, if you're going to take notes, right, you got appreciation, thank you very much. Turkey dinner is going to be a real blessing. And there's a line that goes to the word expectation. Now, I'm going to pause here and tell you, this is not people in poverty I'm talking about. This is you, this is me, this is people. Just people. We slide on the scale and we slide fast. So we're appreciative the first time. The second time, there's an expectation. So we get this all the time. Hey, Matt, thanks for the turkey. Really appreciate that. I was wondering if you could tell me what day you're going to give those turkeys away, because I want to be up in line. I want to make sure I get my turkey. Right? Can you see the difference in the tone? Wow, thanks. I hate that we're in a situation, but this is going to be a blessing. 2, hey, thanks for the turkey. What days are you giving those away? Because we want to make sure we get our turkey. Subtle shift. Expectation. Your friend buys you lunch 5 times in a row. Hey, Matt, when we go to lunch? Right? Hey. How about Dos Pros? How about Bald-Headed Bistro, right? That's a little more pricey, yeah? Appreciation to expectation. Now, the good news is, anytime we're on this slide, we can disrupt it until it gets to the end, and then it becomes very difficult. So the further you are on the scale, and understand this isn't just a step-by-step, it's a continuum. The further you are on the scale, the more difficult it becomes to disrupt. And so you've gone from appreciation to expectation. The next step on that slide, if you're drawing it, you could go downhill. The next step on that slide is entitlement. Thank you, Matt. Wow, I really appreciate this. That's unexpected. 2, hey, Matt, we really appreciate it. I was just wondering what day you're going to give away those turkeys, because I want to make sure I'm there at the front of the line. 2, entitlement, which is, hey, Matt, thanks for letting me know it was Wednesday. We'll be there. We really kind of prefer ham. Is there any possibility that instead of just turkey, you could do like a choice between turkey and ham? Are we looking at a different situation here? Is there a different mentality for the recipient? Now, I'll tell you, these are all conversations that I have all the time, every year, for giveaway programs. Appreciation to expectation and entitlement. And I'll tell you this, it doesn't take long to get there. And it's a dangerous slide where we're applying a relief strategy to a chronic poverty situation. And what we're doing is we're contributing to this chronic poverty situation. Because the last one is the most dangerous. Appreciation, thanks for the turkey, man. I really appreciate it. It's going to be a huge blessing to our family. 2, expectation, hey, Matt, thanks for that turkey. By the way, what day are you going to give that away? I want to be at the front of the line. 2, entitlement, which is, hey, ham instead of turkey. Could we consider that next year? 2, the last one, which at the bottom of the hill is dependency. And this is where we get the phone calls, and we get them all the time. I'd like a turkey dinner. We gave them all away. How am I going to feed my children if you don't give us a turkey? That's a long ways from the appreciation at the top of the slide. And we have that conversation with good, hardworking, out-of-luck people on a regular basis. How am I going to feed my family if you don't give us a turkey? You didn't tell me when I was supposed to pick up this turkey. Now, I also mentioned this isn't people in poverty, this is people. I also mentioned I was an administrator at a psychiatric hospital. When I got there, I realized how hardworking these people were. These are professional, well-paid, hardworking individuals. And I had 10 people per shift, 3 shifts a day. It was a lock-up facility for people who really struggle with some serious mental health issues. So they were locked in there, 10 staff people per shift, 3 times a day, 3 shifts, 30 people a day. And you know what? I don't know how they stay up all night. So I decided, I came up with this programmatic idea. You know what we're going to do is we're going to provide free coffee. That's what the company's going to do. We're going to provide free coffee. You guys work hard. You got to stay up all night. Well, how many of you guys are coffee addicts? And you're not, wow, her hand went up really fast. She's like, yes, I'm proud of it, right? Coffee addicts can drink some coffee. I'm just saying, they can put it down, gallons of it. And so after 1 month of free coffee, my chief financial officer literally came to me and said, Matt, I got some bad news. The company's going bankrupt. I said, what happened? And he was like, it's that coffee program, man. We're losing a fortune on that coffee program. Now, we weren't going bankrupt, but he said, this is insane how much we're spending on coffee in 1 month. And I said, wow, I had no idea. I don't drink coffee. Those people are crazy. So I went back to the next staff meeting and I said, oh, hey guys, I just want to tell you. And I did it right at the end of the staff meeting because I didn't think much of it. I was like, oh yeah, by the way, the free coffee program, I'm going to have to eliminate that because we are spending way too much money. I totally misjudged it, my fault. So from now on, you got to bring your own coffee. Any other questions? All right, thanks. We'll close up the staff meeting. I started walking to my office. 6 6 out of 10 people are storming after me down the hall. Hey, what about our free coffee? You're saying you're just getting rid of that free coffee? I was like, yeah. What are we supposed to do? Buy coffee? I don't know. I don't know if I can work here anymore. I don't know if this is going to work out for me. And I was like, you realize 35 days ago you didn't get free coffee either. I mean, you got free coffee for a month. I had seriously 8 hours of meetings with individual employees talking them off the cliff. Had no idea the power of coffee, but 35 days, they were deeply entrenched in dependency. They're people, well-paid people. Think to your own life. So you ever gotten anything for free for a while and then it got taken away? Now you might even know, and so I moved into an apartment in college. And the people that had been there before moved out early. I hooked up my TV, turned it on, free cable. Yeah, I was like, whoa, this is awesome, right? We got it for 6 weeks and then somebody figured it out. It's probably illegal. I don't even know, right? 6 weeks later, one day I turn it on, just nothing. I'm like, what's wrong with the TV? Something's broke, I'm calling the cable company. I called the cable company. Hey, my cable's out. And they're like, we don't even have an account for you. Well, I had cable. And they're going, but you weren't paying for it, right? And I was like, no, but there was cable here and I was gone. And then suddenly I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. This probably isn't right, We all can slip into this sense of dependency on any program. Let me just give you a scenario. And I'm not saying that any of these programs are bad or that they're ill-willed. In fact, most all of them are conceived out of the best intentions. But a young child gets free child care, and they get to school and they get a free breakfast, and then they get a free lunch, they get free after-school care, and then the second week of school they get a free backpack. And they get that throughout elementary school. In the middle school, they get more of it. And then they get to their sports team and they get free equipment. They get scholarshiped. And then they find out mom gets free housing. That's great. That's really helpful. And then they go to the grocery store with mom and she gets this card and she gets free groceries. Again, not by itself a bad program. when this child graduates high school, what have we created an expectation for? None of those programs are bad. In fact, I can make an argument for any one of those individual programs. But if we create an expectation that free will be given to me, and it requires nothing in return, it doesn't take long for me to start demanding my free coffee, my free cable. That sense of entitlement to dependency can move very quickly on any of us. Which is why we have to be so conscious when we're doing any type of charity work. We have to be so conscious on the impact it has on the dignity, on the dependency, on the work of the individual recipient, as opposed to how it makes us feel as individuals or organizations. So there's a cycle, so the question is how? How do we do this? Well, there's really two parts of this. And again, I'm oversimplifying this, so you'll have to forgive me. We're on a time limitation. But there's really two basic components. If you're looking at development and you want to stay with development, there's two basic components to make sure that you're doing development type work. Number one is relationship. Bob Lupton will acknowledge he might have done that program forever had he not built a relationship and then saw it firsthand. Because those people were never going to complain. They were never going to say, don't do it. But it wasn't until the day he was in the living room that he realized the impact he was having. True development work requires relationships. And I love this in Scripture. This is one of my favorite scriptures. And Bob Lupton points this as an act for why he moved to the neighborhood. In John 1:14, says, the Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us. I like the way the Message interprets that. The Message said, the Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. Now, I'm not suggesting you have to go out and move into every neighborhood that you're going to serve, but emotionally, relationally, it's important that you can connect with the people you serve, that you have a relationship. Because without that relationship, the reality is you may or may not be helping those individuals. And so often, as charity givers, as donors, as service providers, we stand on the outside and throw money, we throw gifts, throw turkeys, we throw whatever at people with the expectation that they will rise up above because we've given them this opportunity. And there's all sorts of examples in this world where that doesn't happen. One of the most classic examples, the old Chicago ghettos, Chicago housing developments. They made these big high-rise buildings where they put all the people that couldn't afford housing, right? And they're like, hey, we give them free or really reduced housing. And the expectation was this was going to be transitional, temporary. These families are going to move in, they're going to get a discount on this, they're going to save money out, they're going to get out, they're going to buy their own house and achieve the American dream. They put hundreds on top of hundreds of families in these facilities with no guidance, no counseling, no education. And the reality is they stayed. They didn't stay for the rest of their life. They stayed for generations. People hand those down to their children because they have a dependency on that program. And that well-intentioned program became toxic for those that were a part of it. Only the few get out of those situations on their own. So we need to have a relationship with the people we serve to actually make a difference. We pull up to the corner on the interstate, on an off-ramp, and there's a guy standing there with the sign. The easiest thing to do is throw $10 at him. That is treating a chronic poverty situation with a relief mentality. If you want to make a difference, it requires development. Now, that can be hard, and we'll talk about that momentarily. The second part is relationship. And this is always tough to swallow. A lot of my donors hate this. I'm in a constant battle with people that give me money all the time, and is that we have to make our work transactional. Transactional. Now, this is a tough one. This is a tough one. But you know, this is true throughout Scripture. In fact, later in John, there's a story of Jesus when he's at Mount Olives, and they bring an adulteress to him. You probably remember this story. The old, he who has not sinned cast the first stone, right? And they all depart. And Jesus is left with this woman by himself, and he says, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She says, "No one, sir." And he says, "Neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now, leave your life of sin." There's an expectation on her, right? This isn't, "You're cleared, I got you off the stoning, now go back to doing whatever you were doing," right? He says, "You're cleared, they shouldn't be judging you, sin no more." There is an expectation, there's a mandate from Jesus himself that is transactional in nature. And when I say transactional, so many times people get caught up in, you're saying everything's going to cost money. No, that's not what I mean. Transaction requires some input from all parties, especially the recipient of those services. Now, I do happen to like what Bob Lupton did. That night, on Christmas Eve, seeing this family, he decided, "I'm never doing this program again." He went back to his staff, he said, "We're closing it down. Never giving away Christmas gifts again." And they said, "But man, there's some families that can use some help around Christmas. I mean, this is Christmas. We're Christians. We should be celebrating." Well, let's figure out another way to do it. And they brainstormed. They came up with this idea. They bought a storefront. And in this storefront, they did take donated gifts, but they told every donor, "Hey, if you donate that gift, we're going to sell it." Now, some donors, quite honestly, were like, "Whoa, no, that takes away my warm, fuzzy feelings, right? I gave this to you so you can give it away to somebody, and I want that warm, fuzzy feeling." Well, that's not what we're in it for. We're going to help these families. We're going to restore dignity, so we're going to sell it. So they stocked their shelves with donated gifts. Now, they marked those toys and gifts and clothes somewhere between garage sale and wholesale. So we're not talking full retail price. These are affordable toys. And so somebody brought in a Millennium Falcon that cost $90 at the toy store. They might mark it at $10. And if this father walks in and says, "Man, my son's wanted that Millennium Falcon, but I only have $5 for Christmas. That's all I can afford. I've paid the utilities, I've paid all the medical bills, and I just got $5 left." Well, they were empowered to negotiate. They didn't give it to him. They didn't say, "I feel bad for you, just take it." They said, "All right, here's the deal. It's $10. You give me $5 that you have in your pocket, and then you give me 1 hour of your time. The $5 will hold it. When your 1 hour is complete, it's yours to take." And so he'd come in for an hour, he'd stock the shelves, he'd mark the prices, he'd sweep up, and he'd say, my hour's done. And so often they'd say, "Actually, you were here for 3 hours, sir." And he said, "I know, I loved it." In fact, the first year they started selling gifts, this is an amazing testament. The first year they started selling gifts, they got more people that participated in the program in that community than actually signed up when they were free. Nobody wants to be the recipient of pure charity. I want to contribute. And so they've never done it. Now they have big nonprofits that roll into town with semi-trucks full of gifts, and they say, "Hey, we want to give these to you." He's like, "Awesome. Those will sell for a nice price." They're like, "You can't sell them. You got to donate them." He said, "Then we won't accept them. We sell everything. And we put it back into the ministry." In fact, that gentleman, for example, that volunteered 3 hours and loved what he was doing, gets hired by the money that comes in. So now you're actually putting the money into developing the community rather than just giving out Christmas gifts. Now, this is way, way harder than just giving out Christmas gifts. But the impact is so much more long-term. Now, that's an easy example. And I'll tell you, you might be sitting there thinking, "Well, I got this one program, it's muddy. I've shown you crisis to chronic poverty, relief to development, but the truth is it's really muddy. The work is very difficult. It's very challenging." My hope today is that in our discussion, you're sitting there thinking about your work differently. You're thinking about the challenges that confront you and how you serve. My hope is that you walk out of here and you say, "I just need to pray about getting some wisdom around the programs that we serve." Because the reality is, somebody came up after last class and said, "So at the United Way, you do all development work?" And I said, "No. We still have a couple giveaway programs. And I'll just be honest with you. Some of these donors, they love those giveaway programs. Why do they love those giveaway programs? Yeah, it makes them feel good. So it's a really hard sell for me to wipe them all out. So I'm not here to tell you I got it perfect or that I know it all. It is hard work to do it right. Development is very difficult. It's challenging, and it's not all money. It might be education. So a perfect example, we've recently had a decade's worth of utility assistance. And utility assistance is somebody shows up at our offices and they say, I can't pay my utility bill. We say, well, you got to show us some evidence, and they show us some evidence. And then once a year, we'll pay their utility bill. We'll write a check to the utility company. And you know how many times we see those people? Once a year. They come back. Almost every year at the same time, they come back to get their free utility bill paid. It was then that we really assessed, we're not developing anybody. I mean, sure, we get them over the hump, but what's the real core of the issue? So one guy is coming in, literally a $400 utility bill every month. $400 utility bill. I said, where do you live? He said, I live in a trailer at 800 square feet. I said, 800 square feet? How are you paying $400? When we went and looked at it, he's got no insulation. The windows are drafty. He's got a little space here, big space heater, just runs it constantly. I was like, no wonder you're paying $400 a month. I said, what if we could reduce your utility bill to $200 a month? He said, I'd never have to come see you again. And we suddenly got this idea to do this extreme energy makeover. And what we do is we essentially do somewhere around $10,000 in renovations to low-income homes, where we renovate their insulation, their windows, their HVAC system so that it's energy efficient. It's not hard to reduce some of those by 50%. So instead of a $400 bill, they're paying $200. Well, that's life-changing. Do the math on that. That's $2,400 extra in their pocket a year. It's unbelievable. Now, it's transactional in that I say, okay, we want you to match it for 10%. The reality is most of them can't. If they can't, then they have to work that 10% off. They have to work, they have to volunteer in their house, their neighbor's house, they have to volunteer at the organizations. Additionally, they're not in this situation because they know everything. We require them a 6-week financial counseling class. So they have to go through the education. Now they have to do this If they don't do it, they don't get the energy upgrades. And, this one's tough, they will not accept utility assistance for the next 3 years. That means they won't come asking for utility bill assistance. Here's the amazing thing. And this is that downward spiral to dependency. We literally have people that I'll say, we'll cut your bill in half. This is an extra $2,400 in your pocket this year in savings. But you can't get utility assistance. And they're like, I don't know if I can do that. And I'll say, you know the utility assistance is like $400 for you, right? Yeah, I know. You know I'm going to save you $2,400 if you do the program, right? Yeah, I know, but I might need that utility assistance. That's the devastating impact of allowing somebody to slip into dependency. They don't even know. You do the logic and the math in front of them, and they're like, I can't let go of this free resource. So I say that all to hopefully inspire you just to consider. Consider the way that we serve, the how. The reading Toxic Charity, Bob Lupton, fantastic book that supports all these concepts in much greater detail than I just covered for you today. Happy Monday, everybody. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate it.